What is up, guys? Welcome back to After the Credits, the review show that no one asked for. Today we are talking about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and this is actually a game that always felt out of reach for me. I remember when it initially released, I was super hyped about the game because it looked really cool, but that was actually before I had played through a FromSoft game, so I just inherently knew that this game was going to be way too difficult for me, so I didn't pick it up at the time. A couple years later, I played through Dark Souls 3 and absolutely loved it and wanted more From Software titles, so I revisited Sekiro after my Dark Souls 3 playthrough and quickly learned that Dark Souls 3 is a game that I abused in iframes by dodging, and Sekiro is a parry-focused game, so it required a completely different playstyle. So once again, the game slipped through my grasp, and I quickly realized didn't have the skills required to play through this game. So set it back down again. Fast forward a little bit further, played through Lies of P. If you've been around the channel for a long time or for a little bit of time, I talk about Lies of P all the time. One of my all-time favorite games, and Lies of P just happens to be a parry-focused game. So once again, Sekiro is back on the table, and finally, I played through the game and had a really, really good time with it. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Roll that stupid intro. So at the very beginning of Sekiro, you are launched into a battle scene between shinobis and somebody else. I should learn this stuff. I should research a little before I'm making these videos, but fuck it. So you have this battle that everybody, gets died, and then there's a comment at the end, the war is finally over. And then at the end of that cutscene, you see a young wolf not wolf, his name is Wolf, a young guy walk into the battlefield and pick up a sword with basically what I would assume is the intention of offing himself, unaliving himself, whatever you want to call it here on YouTube, I don't know. But the shinobi leader comes over and sees him, slices him across the face, essentially, and has a conversation and essentially adopts this young boy. This young boy is who you play throughout the game. His name is Wolf. His father's name is Owl. Owl names his son Wolf, essentially. Irrelevant to the plot of the video here, but Owl trains Wolf to be a shinobi. And the job of a shinobi is to be the personal bodyguard, essentially, of their master. So in this case, Wolf's master is the divine heir of royal bloodline, essentially. And the divine heir has blood flowing through his veins, which makes him immortal. And by becoming the divine heir's shinobi, you actually also have this divine heir blood, so you are unable to die. And that's kind of the story behind why you're able to kind of continue to respawn. So they structure it very nice in this game in that way to kind of give you some lore context why you can't necessarily die, per se. The Shadows Die Twice, the Die Twice subtitle comes into the game because you're able to actually resurrect once you die once. So you have to die twice to actually completely die, and that's related to the bloodline. But anyways, through the whole game, essentially what your main goal is to actually sever the immortality from the divine heir, because what happens is you proceed and continue to die throughout the game as Wolf. You inflict a disease known as dragon rot to all of the NPCs throughout the game, and they get very, very ill. They start to become less useful to you because they're incredibly ill. But also, another mechanic in this game, if everybody is healthy and you die, you have a 30% chance to receive unseen aid, which basically keeps all of your gold on your character instead of losing it all. There's not a mechanic in this game like there is in Souls games where you can go back to your body and recover your lost souls. If you die in Sekiro, you lose it all unless you get unseen aid. And the more people infected by dragon rot, the lower the percentage chances for you to actually receive unseen aid. So you want to try to not die as much as possible. That being said, I will also mention, if you do die a lot in the game and you start to spread the dragon rot, don't be very super concerned. It's going to happen. You're going to die. You're going to run that unseen aid down to like 3%, you're just going to have to deal with the consequences of not being able to have gold to buy certain things. And you might have to do a little bit of grinding on certain enemies in order to acquire the gold again. But later on in the game, you receive an item that you can use at a sculptor's idol to cure everybody on the map of the dragon rot disease. So don't stress about that necessarily too much, but that's an interesting mechanic that's different from the Souls games. You do lose everything on death unless you get that unseen aid. But other than that, you're playing through the game. The Divine Heir wants to remove the immortality because he's sick and he doesn't want to continue to have people getting dragon rot sickness and all of these issues. So you basically take orders from the Divine Heir. You kill all these bosses and mini bosses, and along the way, when you kill a mini boss or a main boss, they typically drop prayer beads. 4 prayer beads equals a prayer necklace, and that increases your vitality. And then also when you defeat bosses, you get their memory, and you can use their memory at a shrine to increase your attack power. So there is no skill system like you would see in a Souls game. You're not leveling individual abilities. It's all tied to killing bosses, getting prayer beads, and getting memories in order to increase your vitality and your attack power. And that's the only 2 stats in the game. Very interesting, very different, but it works very well in this game. Now, with all that plot structure out of the way, as I mentioned in the intro, I thought that Lies of P would have given me the skills required to play through the game, and I was completely wrong. This game is fucking brutally difficult, and you learn very quickly, as one of the main characters in the game says, hesitation is defeat, and you have to keep that mindset while you go through the entire game. You're always going to be on the offensive in this game. You're always going to be one of applying pressure to whether it's just the regular mobs or the bosses themselves. You're constantly playing in a very high risk status in order to get the most out of the experience. And again, this game isn't really you're not going to dodge a whole lot. You're going to spend a lot of the time parrying. The reason why you're going to do that, if you do a proper counter attack or a proper parry attack, you will not take any damage, and it will also apply posture damage to the enemy that you're fighting against. Again, another weird thing about this game, or very different thing I should say, is health bars are really kind of secondary to the posture damage that you're going to apply throughout the game. So a lot of the times in boss fights, you'll notice the health bar of enemies isn't really going down that much, and you're just applying posture damage by using parries and by getting attacks in. And once that posture meter fills up all the way, you're able to perform a death blow, which completely eliminates the remaining health of the boss. Typically, bosses have 2 little dots above their health bar that indicates how many times they need to be death blowed before they are finally defeated. So you spend the time playing through the game, countering, getting slight attacks in, and those slight attacks do health damage, but most importantly, they deal posture damage, getting you closer to that death blow in order to really take down the enemy's health bar. So health, almost inconsequential. It's all about that posture damage, which is very unique to Sekiro. Sekiro also has a very interesting movement system in the game that is very different from games you've seen in the past. This game is very focused on stealth, which kind of took me by surprise. So you spend a lot of time crouching in tall grass to kind of ambush enemies, and this works out phenomenally, especially for mini bosses throughout the game. You'll notice that mini bosses typically have 2 death blow markers, but it is possible for almost every mini boss to find a path to be able to sneak up behind them and perform an ambush attack, which immediately removes one of their death blow markers, making it a situation where you just have to fight the mini boss to get the posture damage built up to perform 1 death blow as opposed to performing 2 death blows. And this helps out a lot through the game, so stealth is very highly recommended. Another great thing this game adds is the grappling hook. So at the beginning of the game, your arm gets chopped off in a fight essentially, and you are saved by a man named the Sculptor. And the Sculptor gives you a prosthetic arm, and equipped with this prosthetic arm is a grappling hook. So throughout the game, you're actually using verticality to your advantage a lot of the times, grappling to higher places that you normally wouldn't be able to reach, and this gives you a very good advantage as far as stealth is concerned. And again, very different playstyle or approach to what you would see in a regular Souls game. It is much more focused on stealth and movement, and all that stuff is phenomenally designed in this game, I must say. They did a great job with all of that. Now, as you play through the game, you're able to acquire different tools throughout the playthrough that you can actually pick up and return to the sculptor with to fit new prosthetics into your arm. So the grappling hook is always available, but you unlock an R2 ability, which is the use of the prosthetic arm to perform a different style of attack. There's a lot of different examples of this. The first one that you're going to come across is the ability to throw shurikens at enemies to hit them from a distance. There's things like a flamethrower vent that you can put on your arm, which is very strong against monster type enemies to apply burn damage, and burn applies slight posture damage at kind of a tick rate, which is very, very useful for certain enemies in the game. But there's a ton of different tools that you can get and acquire throughout the playthrough to help enhance your combat and enhance the abilities that you have playing through the game. So really cool mechanic, unique mechanic, very similar to Lies of P, honestly, and that whole prosthetic arm system, very actually completely identical to that, to be honest. They were definitely inspired by Sekiro for that system, but it works really well in this game as well. So really cool to find those tools and socket them in and see what they do. A lot of fun. Now, to talk about the obvious things that I always talk about very quickly, because to be honest, I don't have the English dictionary language established enough to go into great detail about these things, but that's besides the point. The presentation in this game is phenomenal. Every environment that you visit is great. I love the way the character looks. I love the way the character moves. I love the boss designs. I love all of that stuff in this game. It's all phenomenally crafted. The sound design, fantastic. There's no issues of me questioning why that sound was there or why that song played at that point. It's all very good and immersive. And all that stuff is a top-notch, which you would expect from Software, and they don't drop the ball in this game whatsoever. Now we're going to some of the negatives, and there's not any. I'm nitpicking here, and the first negative we're going to talk about gets resolved, and the second negative I'll mention isn't a negative for me, but I could see it being a negative for some of you. So, the first thing we'll discuss is the obvious one, the difficulty. This game will beat you into a fucking pulp throughout the entirety of the playthrough. And I'll be completely honest with y'all, 90% of the playthrough, I was not the happiest camper. I was not having the most fun playing through this game because it stomps the shit out of you and makes you feel like an absolute piece of shit while you're playing through it. It is brutally difficult. But I did mention that this game redeems itself, and that is with the final boss fight, which we'll have a segment on at the end that I will put a spoiler tag on, so if you don't want that ruined for you, you don't have to listen to it. But we will talk about why this gets resolved in that section. But I will tell you, this game is fucking hard, and I can see people giving up at multiple different segments throughout the game. There are a lot of skill checks in this game, a lot of skill check bosses, where it's trying to make sure you're equipped to perform properly throughout the rest of the game, and those skill checks are brutally difficult, and they beat your ass. So just be prepared for that. This is one of those rare circumstances, though, that I would say, don't give up on this game. This game ends, we'll talk about it, but it is a phenomenal, it is well worth your time, well worth the investment, well worth the hard work to see the end of the game. Even though it's hard at the beginning, stick with it, bite down on your teeth or whatever you have to do, but stick with it, it will pay off. And then the last thing, very nitpicky, didn't affect me, might affect some of you, is the fact that there's no character customization, there's no build diversity in this game. You have a shinobi sword, and that is it, and the prosthetic arm. There's no real, you're not going to be buying axes and spears and doing a bunch of different combat styles. There's one style, the game is designed for that style, and you're going to play that style. So, doesn't affect me, but I've heard people talk about it before. But just something to note. You're not going to be able to go through the game with daggers or anything like that you're used to from other games. This game is designed with one weapon in mind. It's going to force you to play that way. Now, if you've ever watched a video on this channel before, you know that I don't like to spoil it. But this is a special occasion where I have to. It has to be talked about to give context to the negative point that I made a second ago. And also, this whole game is summarized at the end. So I just feel like this is a situation where I have to discuss it. So that being said, I will leave a timestamp at the top of the video for you guys. So if you do not want to hear the spoilers, go to that timestamp. It'll skip to the end of the video where you will not get the game spoiled for you. but I have to do it in this case. It's too good not to talk about. Alright, so if you're still here, you're in spoiler territory, and I gave you a fair warning. But with that being said, the final area, the final boss fight of this game is the best boss fight in video game history. Without a question, hands down, no doubt about it. So, when you walk into the final boss arena, you face up against Genichiro. Now, to give a little context, at the very beginning of the game, Genichiro is the person that cuts your arm off, and then there is a fight with Genichiro at the midpoint of the game that is one of the most challenging boss fights I've faced, to be honest. In that mid-fight encounter, he's got two phases. He's got his normal phase, which isn't all that difficult, but you learn that Genichiro has found a way to utilize rejuvenating waters, which allows him to actually revive, giving him a second death blow marker. And in this encounter, he turns into a fucking demon and is just an absolute massive skill check boss that gives you quite a bit of problems at the mid-game point. Obviously you get through him, but when you walk into the final boss arena, you find Genichiro again. And Genichiro in the final boss fight is automatically in stage 2, but he only has one death blow marker, meaning you only have to kill Genichiro one time. The nice thing is, you're much better at the game at this point, so you can blow through Genichiro pretty easily. So you blow through Genichiro, you think everything is good, but then Genichiro puts the mortal blade to his neck, and out of his neck crawls his grandfather, Ishin Ashina, who you've talked to throughout the game. Ishin Ashina is actually the person that named you Sekiro, which is kind of interesting. But Ishin Ashina comes out of his grandson, and you realize at that point that Ishin Ashina has 3 phases. So it's a 4-phase final boss fight, to be honest, which is an absolute gauntlet. That is pretty much unheard of in this series, or from Software to have 4 phases, but you know you're in for a fucking ride at that point. So basically how it works is you fight through Genichiro, you kind of blow through him, you want to get through Genichiro flawless, and then you get to Ishin 1. Ishin 1 has a completely different moveset than Genichiro. Obviously, it's a completely new boss. So you have to learn Ishin 1's moveset while dying a bazillion times to Ishin 1. And of course, every time you die, you gotta go through Genichiro again. So you go through Genichiro, get to Ishin 1, die, go through Genichiro, Ishin 1, die, as you're slowly learning the process. And this repeats throughout the entire boss fight. So Genichiro, Ishin 1, and Ishin 1 becomes very easy once you learn it, but I will tell you, it takes a couple hours. I mean, this whole boss fight took me 10 to 12 hours without question. It probably doubled my playtime, just this boss fight alone. Very, very difficult. But you learn Ishin 1, and then obviously you go to Ishin 2. Ishin 2, instead of just having a sword like Ishin had in Ishin 1, he's now got a sword, a spear, and a gun. So again, whole new moveset that you have to learn, which means you're going to die a lot. And the cycle just keeps repeating. And while you're doing this, you're again going through Genichiro, Ishin 1, Ishin 2, and then eventually Ishin 3, and learning that whole moveset, which is essentially the same as Phase 2, but he's got lightning attacks that you can lightning reversal. And to break that down, which is kind of an interesting mechanic that's not used a whole lot in the game, but if an enemy uses a lightning attack, if you jump and get hit by the lightning, you can hit R1 and land on the ground and do a lightning reversal, which actually damages the enemy instead of you. It's a mechanic you learn later on in the game, but either way, the whole boss fight is incredibly, incredibly difficult. But when you finally beat this boss, it is the best feeling in the world. And the reason that I mentioned before that the difficulty for the remaining of the game gets rectified at the end is because you realize this game all the way through has been preparing you for this encounter, and this boss is designed to make sure you are an absolute master of Sekiro. And that's the way any final boss fight should be, in my opinion. This boss fight makes sure that you know your shit when it comes to this game, and it leaves you feeling like an absolute god among men. So all the difficulty from the earlier stages of the game becomes nullified because you realize the game was trying to put you in a position to be able to take this guy on. And without a doubt, hands down, unquestionably this is the best boss fight in gaming history that I have experienced up to this point, and I do not see Ishin Ashina being topped anytime soon. So play through this game from start to back. It is worth every minute of it. Even though it's difficult, even though it's going to be hard to continue at times, it is so worth it to experience this boss fight and to get the feelings that this fight gives you. Absolutely fantastic. 100% recommend it. All right, guys, welcome back. If you skipped the spoiler stuff, appreciate you still trying to see the end of the video, so thanks for sticking around. But other than that, guys, that's going to do it for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. This is a fucking fantastic game. Absolutely fantastic video game. As far as where I would put it on my letter grading system, I would put this game at high A tier. And the reason I would put it high A tier is I think it is very, very, very unapproachable for someone just getting into a From game or anything like that. This is a very hard game to recommend if you're not already ingrained with that kind of gameplay structure, I guess, because this game requires a completely different playstyle than Souls games. So it's kind of hard to recommend it to Souls players, but at the same time, it's Souls players are the only people that you can really recommend it to because of how incredibly hard the game is. So it's a hard game to recommend. That being said, I can't put it at the very top of the top as far as all the games that I've played goes, but it is a game that I absolutely love. I can see myself revisiting it in the future, way in the future. I got a lot of other games I got to play, if you know me, but I truly love this game, and if you're up for a very stiff challenge, without a doubt, I highly recommend Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Other than that, love you guys all so much for being here and supporting all these videos. It means the world to me. And I hope you guys are enjoying. We got a lot more games to play through, a lot more episodes of After the Credits to get through as well. So stick around for that. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the video. We'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.